Why don't they go back to my what's in that's it. What? But if I and that's beautiful. Here, it could be by you because here. And we're back with Harrowings Live. We're harrowing the Christmas market. No, that's sad. What a big cost. Little prints of all sorts. Jewelry. Vendors are out in Vinden. Interesting. And catch a little bit of the Christmas spirit out here in Washington, D.C. Entered DuPont Circle. Not more photo worthy than it is video worthy, but if you're with me, as Eric Knudsen, hey, long time, buddy. And being at Larry R. Catch a little bit of who, what, when, and where. Festive. In spite of everything. It smells good. Teas and spices. We got a coffee place ever. Baltimore's original donut stand here in D.C. Baltimore's a close cousin of us, after all. Europe's finest cheeses. We like all the apps. Get those. Oh, exotic. I've got not much on my mind today beyond the normal things, and the fact that we could use our minds to do a lot better than we have in the past. And, when it comes down to it, the trends I was talking about in my most recent post, 1.7 billion people in 1901 compared to 6.2 billion in 2001 to our present world population, about 8.25 billion people. Got a lot of minds have arrived all at once. Considering there's probably only been about 100 billion of us total. And about 74,000 years ago, we were reduced to about 10,000 at max, who have survived to repopulate the earth. You can see a squirrel across the way making its way near the fountain. Fountain running. I'm heading down P Street, I think. Could go down Massachusetts. I'm heading towards the Smithsonian museums by degrees. There are a lot of different ways I could go. This is the one I'm choosing right now. P Street. Looking at different iterations of the human species. Not very genetically diverse, apparently. Due to that Toba supervolcano explosion about 74,000 years ago, it's estimated, which caused a massive die-off. I'd like to know more about that, and the other bottlenecks we've been through. Certainly our numbers have been cut by various things, and we may yet become extinct. There are those who think that our own technology will do us in. We have to be very careful that it doesn't turn everything into paper clips, for instance. But I'm doing a little primary documentation of who, what, when, and where. But the idea that part of being a good ancestor is to document decisions that were made by different folks who are out and about. And everybody is making a decision, whether consciously or not. I was talking quite a bit with Kay Stoner earlier today about conscious decisions, making conscious choices, and how we interact with artificial intelligence and chatbots mainly is her thing. And her new book, AI Self-Defense, is out. It'll help people to make good, informed choices. I want to see that branch out. I've been looking at benevolent AGI as a possible future because I believe if we enable our tech to help us, it can make us more efficient and effective and less harmful to the environment overall. I was noticing this when I was looking at some 3D printed race car parts at a conference over at the Washington Conference Center last June. Didn't realize that, a computer system on an airliner coming out of India caused the plane to crash. But I ran into an article by one of my favorite philosophers, Slavoj Žižek of Slovenia. And he was talking about this in the context of how we need philosophy to save the planet, particularly in terms of how we use language, which is what I'm doing now, using language to talk to all y'all. Got Denick DeBro here as well. If you're interested in what I'm having to say, feel free to chime in the chat, and I'll try to pay attention to that a little bit. I'd like to know where people are in the world. That's always interesting to me. And beyond that, what lights you up inside? What lights me up inside is thinking, long-termism. I was talking earlier today about how 700 years ago was 1325. It's 2025 now. And if we extrapolate from 1325 to 2025, we know what happened there and how it's been going, and all the things we've done to make our lives possible, making fun possible too, eh? That's interesting. Anyway, I didn't look at the QR code, but there you go. If you want to, you can. Well, that little dog's alive. It's looking at me out the window. I didn't think it was at first, but it turned its head as I passed, staring at me. That's kind of cool. I like being watched at some level. And what else do I want to talk about? Well, 1325 is 2025, 700 years. Quite a number of generations, really. I know my ancestry back that far. As many people can find out these days, ancestry.com. And that's before the Black Death. But what I wanted to talk about, of course, is some projection based on that of where we'll be in 2725. And at the astronomical pace at which our technology appears to be advancing, no telling, right? I mean, I had a little blurb generated by one of those chat bots about what might be going on out in the moons of Saturn. And I can imagine that our technology could be out there transcending us. And it is already when you think about it. Got Voyager 1 and 2, Pioneer 10 and 11, and New Horizons all heading out of the solar system. Got it ready for escape from the sun's gravity. And no telling where they're going to end up. Just these little small pieces of robotic machinery. And they'll die, they're not going to be powered forever. But while they are still going, we've gotten reports back from interstellar space from Voyager 1 anyway. Out beyond the heliopause. And on they go. They don't run into anything because space is so enormously big. They'll just continue until protons decay. Like that, like it is. So it's said. Hearing those folks talking about AI as they pass me by, it's a lot to learn. A lot to learn. I think of myself as still being on the youngish side, and I'm not. But at the same time, I'm still alive and still gotta think about how I can be a good ancestor, even though I myself am not contributing my biologicals into the stream. So far as I know, don't plan on it. My wife and I are childless, and are likely to remain so. And now that past is prologue, one can always think that something might happen. There's also cloning. We're not doing a lot of that these days of human beings, nor does there seem to be much interest in it. Immortality, though, something I think about. Passing by the Carnegie Institution of Washington. Big truck here. Pit stop. There's the White House down there. Just keep passing by. Wonder what it's in the weekend plans of our president. The stuff is flying around. Big distraction. I don't know. I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings surrounding the behavior of the ultra rich. We have the power to do something about it, but we don't. And largely because of how we set up the system in the first place, or allowed it to be set up. Something to think about. We all play a role in it. All of us. Every single person on the planet makes decisions. Some people have a greater freedom than others, but we're all chained together by gravity, if nothing else. So else I want to talk about that. Well, I have a few more joining. John Marshall's here, Alexei Zaitsev. Good to have you, Angie Chi. Alexei and I have talked a little bit about various folks, Anthony Peake being one of them. He gave me another name to look up, which I forgot already. Sorry about that, Alexei. We're talking about Irvin Laszlo and the Budapest School a little, the Akashic Records. Yeah, that everything is being laid down here in electrons on servers, perhaps. The Akashic Records have always been there, taking it all down. The scribe, I sat down with my scribe earlier today, and my anima, who I call Eris, the goddess of chaos, and we penned a few thoughts. I largely rotated around some tunes that were playing in my head. I often don't get to the point. I wrote another one called Surfacing, which is really ripping off of a Margaret Atwood title that I read when I was in college by the same name. Little novel. She's got a memoir out again, another piece of memoir. And I might want to look at that. I'm going to go back by Kramer books later today on my way home. But for now, I'm just walking down. I'll walk it down 17th Street, 15th, across 16th already. Somebody's got an electric fan sitting out here. My grandfather used to manufacture fans that look very similar to this one. It's a Westinghouse, though. We had one that would shock the heck out of you if you weren't careful. Loose wires. That's fun. to walk along Kicking and every so often and think about how it's spinning here and now. And that while I've got breath in the body, it can move this animal around, have agency. And every little thing does make a difference. Words I'm using, phonemes, sending out, structure of language, it's all, there, available for other people to pick up and use. Dave Stoner was talking about localization a bit, and the Chinese language, Mandarin, as being one of the many languages that are used in China. And something to think about, the very different forms of language that cause different forms of thought. I only really know the Indo-European side of things, German, Danish, bit of Italian, bit of French, very little Spanish. But all of these languages basically are formed in ways that change our thought. English, of course, really bastard little language it is, made up of all kinds of bits and pieces of Anglo-Saxon, Danish, Celtic tongues, Welsh, Cornish, Pictish, sort of mixed together. You can tell by things like cow and beef, mix of the Norman French and the Anglo-Saxon, German. So here I am on Massachusetts Avenue. I think about crossing here. Maybe not. I'll head on down in this direction. Past the embassy of Hungary. My friend Harriet's from Hungary. We talked a few weeks back on a Monday, I believe it was. I'd had lunch with a nurse at Sibley Hospital named Brian. It was nice to catch up with him for a bit. Catch up again some other time, I expect. Now I'm not just walking for exercise. Gotta keep moving to keep moving, I got about 10,000 steps in the other day, maybe, or more like 15,000, something like that. 9 miles. And earlier in the week, I got in like 20 some thousand. I think the most I've done lately was Monday before last when I did 13.1. Coming on in street. Slightly confused about where I am. That's Massachusetts. This is Highland. 115th. That's funny. Am I going north or south? This is quickly as it needs to be. No, this appears to be MA Wolves. Massachusetts Avenue. Leasing. Huh. So that's Massachusetts. I'm going to walk away. "15th Street, Northwest." Puppy. It's the National Housing Center. 1,500 Mass, renovated studios and 1 bedrooms. So if you're new to the passing show, this is just a little bit of who, what, when, and where in Washington, D.C., United States of America, in case you're not from around here. On this set pager, do I want to interview Irvin Laszlo? Well, can we get that done, do you think? Same houses. Looks like that Charm series. Yeah, not anymore. I'm out to the city, more commercial zone. Yeah, I don't know if I'd need to interview Irvin Laszlo, though. Could be interesting. I mean, I've read a lot of his books, and I'm thinking I'm still not convinced, even with all of the research and all of the evidence that they claim to have. I'm a skeptic, and I like to amplify signals through the noise, sure enough. I'd like to have interesting conversations, no doubt. But I'm not sure that I wouldn't be contrarian in that view. And I was talking about radical contrariness, being a radical contrarian, as in the Hegelian dialectic of having a thesis, having an antithesis, having a synthesis. Because I don't know. I just know how things seem to me. And they could be different. We don't know. So, Lexi, are you posting? Are you writing in Substack? Are you actually giving a vent to your perspectives? Because it'd be interesting, I think, to read you, not just talk to you one on one this way and amplify your signal through the noise a bit. I find that if people find me, that's kind of worth it. I ran into a guy who's a pretty well-known journalist, or at least well-traveled journalist. He's been like in 92 countries. I was tr- spacing now on his first name. I think it's David A. Andelman of Andelman Unleashed, and had him on a couple times. And then I went on his Zoom call he does with some people. It's not heavily trafficked. He's trying to do something on the side there. And I think it's a good service to humanity. And he has some of the heavy hitters come on, journalism, The Economist, and I don't know what all. I happen to comment that, the media tends to slant things and distort them. And he took issue with that. And I never really went back to that because, well, he sort of cut me off. It was a bit rude. And maybe I wasn't well structured in my comment. That could be true as well. But, we need to listen to each other. We need to really listen and try to see other people's perspectives, not just shut them down. So, that's the kind of thing I fear when I get on somebody who's like a known person with a particular axe to grind. You have to be careful. I have my doubts about just about everything and everybody, but I like to give them airtime and I like to listen. I like to have other people listen too. But I think one of the problems I see is we're not very, very talkative. I don't do Twitter spaces. I'm glad you interviewed Anthony Peake. That's great. Great content. I post 70 essays. Do you post them on Substack, Alexi? Or are you saying you post them somewhere else? I don't know Clubhouse. I don't do Twitter spaces. So, anyway, I do Substack. That's it. I'm glad you got Anthony Peake on. I'd like to see those. Send me the link or just throw the link in the chat and we'll go there potentially. I'm on X. I tend to just amplify signals on X. I don't tend to do anything else. I also amplify myself, of course, but my Substack in particular, I don't see I get much traction there. I did have some interface. It seemed personal with Paul Holdengraber of the New York Public Library, who did a thing called a phone call with Paul, which is part of what I'm doing as well. Kind of inspired by that, by Patti Smith also. Patty does this thing where she goes live and, she sort of stumbles through what she wants to say. And it's just comical in some ways and very immediate and very real, which I appreciate. I think she was on last night from San Francisco, maybe, or maybe that was the night before. And I amplified it, I made a comment. I tried to make sure they hear me, they make comments. That's what we need. So we need to have conversations. So as you say, okay, you're on Substack, you have published on Substack. Well, I got to look at your stuff, man. Yeah, you get there, your link in the chat. Like I said, get other people looking at it. We've got 11 people here. I think we had just about as much for Kay and me. And hopefully we'll have other people looking at Kay's clips and, the different things we were talking about in terms of AI self-defense. Because that's real in some ways, as opposed to all this esoteric stuff that I find interesting, but I'm skeptical. That's why I like Mitch Horowitz. He's also skeptical, a theosophist, and I'm a theosophist. And I think theosophy it sort of lends itself to people who aren't sure, but we sense that there might be more to all this than meets the eye. Some of us are a little airy-fairy. I went to some of their calls for the DC chapter, and I found it just too weird. People are just out there with all kinds of different perspectives. Now I got to figure out, when am I going to get to go? It's going to be that way or that way. I'm trying to head down toward Mall, so I'm going to go that way. 42 seconds. 42 is the answer. I'm a big Douglas Adams fan. I and the Butterflies joined. Douglas Adams, ring a bell? Okay. Yeah, he's died way too young. The day I bought the Complete Hitchhiker's Guide, a big tome, at a bookstore in Amma in Denmark, not far from Copenhagen, walked down there and bought myself a copy to help me through the long winter of 2001, I guess, 2002. And he died that day. And I was shocked. And I'm not sure which year it was. Probably was 2001. Looking back, I think it was 2002. But I left there on September 30th, 2002, to return only briefly in 2003 to pass through the airport. So which way? I'm on K Street. K Street is a home of an awful lot of law firms. And I am close to it. There's the Hampton. My wife used to work in the building right down there when she was at Jefferson Consulting initially. And then they moved down there. 1666.
Other one is very much like it looks like a belly tuck. Okay. But it's things on right there.
Yeah, we're gonna cut down here.
Oh, that is because
Retail space release over there. Was a restaurant. Another one there. So much retail space for lease. It's really a downturn in our historic bank available.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I talking about? Let's see what we're talking about. Try to send me a message on Substack. I can't send you. You can't send to me. That's too bad. The peak interview, Gary Lockman. Yeah, he's good. I love Lockman. I don't like his voice much, though. I can't listen to him. I don't know why. I think it's a tendency to do probably something I do, which is to a lot. And He's not really fluid in his speech in some ways that I'm kind of looking for. Maybe I need to work on it myself, beginning to consciously think about it. Got some decent training on it, actually, years ago. Very simple. Inhale when you find yourself without to say, By Gary Lockman's Beyond the Robot, The Life and Times of Colin Wilson. First thing I saw of his that leapt out to me as I was out having dinner with my wife at the Tuna Cliffs Tavern down in Capitol Hill. And I was at Capitol Hill Books after that dinner, and that book just leapt out at me. And I've been looking at Colin Wilson since then, listening to tapes. His voice I can handle. And Lockman's book is very well done. I mean, a lot of good references all through it. It's opened up a whole trove of literature to me, that of which I was more or less unaware. Elements of Gnosticism by Stuart Holroyd, who apparently, last I checked, is still alive. Though he's in his 90s. I wonder how he's doing. Hopefully well. I don't know that he's still into the Gnosticism thing. I kind of into some of the concepts, like the pleroma. We talked about that yesterday, actually, in my post. What am I on about there? And I do a click, which is explained from the Gnostic perspective. I don't buy everything, but when it comes down to it, knowing it's kind of inaccessible. Oh, you're writing some more. Ask questions about regression, and Philip K. Dick reverted to Jesus times. Yeah, Carl Jung reverted to Middle Ages. Yeah, he did. That's true. Actually, he went even further, right? When Jung went down, he went down like into the prehistoric realm in his dreams. And yeah. So I don't know, man. I just know how things seem to me. And of course, we were talking about Whitmer. I've forgotten the guy's name now. DW, somebody who was involved in child psychology in particular, 20th century, died in 1971. And, he was about holding space, the idea that you need to be held a certain amount when you're young in order to feel safe. There's internal circuits that Robert Anton Wilson talks about that are lined up as we develop. And anyway, that guy thought that Jung, at about 4 years old, really was having some psychosis, infantile psychosis of sorts. And I kind of relate to that. I think everyone should read that chapter as well as Early Years, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Carl Gustav Jung, and get an idea of what the man was going through as he was coming up, because his development, very interesting. Of course, there's so many aspects to Jung that are questionable, Hesse as well, all of these authors who were coming up through the 20th century. And it makes me question myself and my own actions as I move from dawn to dusk and make different decisions. They're creating those ripple effects of time that are going to go forward. And maybe they'll just nothing. No. But then again, there's a lot. I'm, of course, trying to carry on my father's legacy as a research historian, and I think about doing primary documentation of who, what, when, and where as we walk along and talk about these esoteric matters. What have you said? Gnosticism and the Aldebus Demiurge is like a prison warden. Yeah, I think so. Asked questions about, yeah, got it. Cool. Well, I think that's fascinating, Alexei. I'm so glad you're out there in Moscow, right? And how about that? We could have a conversation. Now, what we need is more conversations and less recrimination. I mean, the demonization of others is, how we create monsters in ourselves, in my view. Yeah, I can't really say it any plainer than that. We must eventually get to the point where we recognize our essential humanity and how no one is above anybody else in reality. We're all doing the best we can with what we have. We're definitely gifted, but we're very, very similar genetically. And we're apt to destroy this planet if we're not careful, simply because we're so bright. I think we're brighter than we are. But we do have the ability to inform ourselves. We do have the ability to scoop up the information that we have available. We have technologies that are helping with that. Resource allocation, grouping technology. I think I got a tattoo in my brain what RAG stands for, that RAG technology. There are different types, right? There's graph RAG, there's multimodal RAG. I looked at a whole list of them after talking to Kay today, because these are things that help decrease hallucination in AI. We need to be aware of them and aware of what is being used by the instantiations that we're using to do our research, have conversations, to brainstorm ideas, because brainstorming is kind of a useful activity, and particularly to having bad ideas. And then we can crack those open and refine them to figure out what'll make them good. That's a thought. And how's my power? Oh God, I'm down to 63%. I'm probably going to cut this off here, and we may have another session of the passing show later on, but I do want to maintain some degree of power in the phones. Well, I don't need to interview anybody for the Akashic Field research stuff. Could talk about it, but I don't think I need to interview anybody. It's not really my thing, right? But it's fun to play around with as an idea. It doesn't seem to really hold any value. It either is or isn't. The likelihood of it isn't is pretty strong. Um, but I think the likelihood of it is probably not provable, no matter what you do. But people are going to tell stories. We're storytelling animals. We make up stuff all the time. That's one of the great things about our imagination and ability to write fiction. The thing is, we can dupe ourselves into believing all kinds of esoteric horseshit that ain't necessarily so. Very entertaining. Don't get me wrong. But I think we all ought to stand outside ourselves and ask ourselves often, what do we really mean by that? And do we really even understand what we're saying? I don't know. I just know how things seem to me. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Well, I would read you if I knew where to read you. You just have to plop your link into the messages, and that would work. I don't know why you can't text me. I think maybe you're blocked or something. I have no idea. I didn't do it that I know of, but I'll check it out, see if I can figure out what your problem is and trying to connect. And my email's out there, so it shouldn't be hard. Talk to you later. Thanks for interlocutor being having a discussion. That's always more interesting.